has its own distinct smell. This discovery came on that October evening when my fingers first touched the yellowed photographs from the 1923 case. Until that moment, the archives had smelled only of dust and time. But when the file with the crime materials opened, another aroma entered the air. Metallic, sweetish, corrosive. A smell that made me recoil from the table and press my palm to my lips. Anna Chen had been working at the city archives for 5 years. It had become a refuge after the outside world had become too loud, too fast, too demanding. Here, among the endless rows of shelves and cardboard boxes, time flowed differently. Every document held someone's forgotten story. Every folder contained a life that had once mattered. That evening began as usual. Rain pounded the third-floor windows, creating a rhythmic melody for working on the criminal cases of the last century. The project to systematize the archives seemed like a boring routine. Transfer the data to a digital database, create a catalog, organize the chaos of decades. No one suspected that in their hands were the threads of a web that would entangle the researcher's own life. The first case was in a worn manila folder, Murder of Mei Li Zhang, 1923. Young woman, 24, worked as a translator for the Immigration Service. Found dead in her apartment, multiple stab wounds, signs of a ritualistic nature of the crime. The killer was not found. The pages were turning one after another. Notes were appearing in the notebook when my gaze fell on a photograph of the crime scene. The black and white photo showed a small room covered in blood. But that was not what made me freeze. In the background, by the window, stood a man in an expensive suit. He was watching the police at work with an expression of cold satisfaction on his face. The detective wrote him down as a witness. Damien Thornfield, a neighbor, gave a statement. The next folder was waiting for its turn. Keiko Tanaka murder, 1943. My heart sank. The same pattern. Young woman of Asian descent worked as an archivist at the city library. Found in an apartment, multiple stab wounds, ritualistic in nature. The killer was not found. The 1943 photos were sharper, but no less eerie, and again, in the background of one of the pictures, he appeared. The same man in the same expensive suit, with the same expression on his face. Not a day older in 20 years. Hands trembled as he opened the third folder. Murder of Hiromi Sato, 1963, university librarian, age 26. Same pattern, same ritual elements, and again a photograph with the same man in the background. By the time they examined the 1983 murder of Ling Wang, the museum's archivist, their palms were covered in cold sweat. The digital camera had captured the crime scene in color, making the blood even more vivid, even more real. And there, among the crowd of onlookers and police officers, stood he, Damien Thornfield, unchanged for 60 years. The last folder was the thickest. Murder of Yuki Nakamura, 2003. Court interpreter, 28 years old. The researcher already knew what she would find. The same ritual elements, the same pattern, the same person in the photographs. But when the high-resolution digital images appeared before her eyes, the world around her began to sway. Damien Thornfield stared straight into the camera. His eyes were cold, almost black, and there was something in them that made you jump back from the table. Knowing. He knew he was being photographed. He wanted to be captured, like he was signing his name to his work. The chair rolled back as his mind tried to process what he had seen. 5 murders every 20 years, from 1923 to 2003. The same man in every photograph, unaging, unchanging. It was impossible. People didn't live 80 years and still look young, but the evidence was there, spreading that strange metallic smell. The rain had grown heavier, and the sound of drops on glass resembled a drum beat. The archive had been emptied hours ago, and the researcher was alone among shadows and documents. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting nervous reflections on the photographs. In this light, Damien Thornfield's face seemed alive, his eyes following every movement. Trying to focus on the facts was not successful. Maybe it was a family tradition. Father, son, grandson, all with the same name. But the photographs did not lie. It was the same man, the same facial features, the same scar above the left eyebrow, the same mole on the cheek. An examination of the details of each case revealed an even more sinister pattern. All the victims were young women of Asian descent. All worked with documents, information, knowledge. All lived alone, with no close connections. All were found in their apartments, murdered with multiple stab wounds in a ritualistic manner. The calculator showed the exact numbers: 1923, 1943, 1963, 1983, 2003, exactly 20 years between each murder. If the pattern continued, the next one would have happened in 2023. This year, the thought hit like a physical blow. The calendar on the wall showed October 2023. There were 2 months left in this year. Somewhere in the city, Damien Thornfield had already chosen his next victim. The photographs were piled up, but they couldn't be put away in folders. The faces of the murdered women stared out from the yellowed paper. Mei Lee, Keiko, Hiromi, Lin, Yuki. They all looked alike. They all resembled Anna Chen, young woman of Asian descent, works with documents and information, lives alone, no close ties. Parents died 3 years ago. Few friends, no personal life. The profile was a perfect match for Damien Thornfield's victims. The archive around him suddenly seemed not a refuge, but a trap. The long rows of shelves turned into a labyrinth from which there was no exit. The shadows between the shelves became deeper, darker. Somewhere in this darkness, eyes could be hidden, watching what was happening. The documents were quickly collected, and the researcher headed for the exit, but stopped at the door. On the floor lay an envelope that had not been there when she entered. Anna's name was written on it in a beautiful, old-fashioned handwriting. Inside was an old photograph, a group portrait of a family from the early 20th century. In the center stood a young man, immediately recognizable, Damien Thornfield, exactly the same as in the crime photos. On the back was written, "The Thornfield Family, 1890." conditions must be observed. The photograph fell from her hands, and Anna ran out of the archive into the rainy night. But even on the street, amid the city noise and light, the feeling of someone else's gaze did not leave. Somewhere in the darkness, Damien Thornfield watched, planning how to complete the cycle begun more than a century ago. The understanding came instantly. The researcher became part of the history she was studying, and this history is not over yet. In the archive, the night is always thicker than outside. The darkness here is not just the absence of light. It is viscous, sticky. It penetrates the lungs and settles on the skin like the dust that soaks old files. The lamps above the desk barely dispel this darkness, turning the space around into a shaky swamp of shadows. Every rustle, every creak of the wooden floor seems to be an echo of someone else's steps, left in these walls for decades. The events of the last few days haunted him. The case files lay on the table like silent accusers. His gaze returned again and again to the photographs, to the face that had not changed for decades, to the eyes full of icy calm. Damien Thornfield. The name that now sounded in his head like a spell, like a sentence. Delving into the city's archives was more than just a job. It was an escape from fear. Fear of being the next in line. Fear of not finding an explanation before it was too late. Fingers slid over the spines of old volumes, searching for the name Thornfield in lists of property owners, victims, witnesses, donors to museums and libraries. The name kept coming up, as if the city's history was steeped in the family. In one of the drawers, pushed deep into the back of the room, was a diary, a tattered notebook with faded ink. On the cover, in neat handwriting, was written, Elizabeth Thornfield, 1903. The pages smelled of old wax and smoldering candles. The entries were full of anxiety, despair, and something else. The doom with which a person faces his own fate. On the night of the full moon, my father told me not to sleep. He said, blood for prosperity, death for power. I don't understand why it should be me, but tradition demands sacrifice. My mother cried when I left, but she didn't stop me. Is our family, no one argues with tradition. Further details of the ritual, a rite that is repeated every 20 years. The victim is a young woman connected with books, knowledge, archives. In return, the family receives prosperity, power, long life. The one who makes the sacrifice will not grow old until he passes the vow to the next heir. The lines trembled under his fingers. Everything matched. The dates, the professions, the nationalities of the victims. The ritual was not just a family secret. It was a contract made with something ancient and insatiable. And each new Thornfield heir had to continue the cycle, lest he become a victim himself. Elizabeth's notes were filled with names, men, women, children, who had vanished from the family records. Those who had tried to refuse the ritual had vanished. Several pages had been torn out, as if someone had tried to erase the traces of a failed attempt to break the chain. Further searching led to a will from 1883, a yellowed sheet of paper covered in calligraphic handwriting. every heir of the Sui Thornfield family is obliged to preserve the tradition. The victim must be chosen by the sign, young, single, working with the memory of the city. Otherwise, the curse will fall on the whole family, and the end will come for everyone. There was no remorse or hesitation in those lines, only cold determination. The Thornfield family had turned murder into a ritual, a survival mechanism, and the city had become a theater for their bloody performances. Newspaper archives surfaced with stories of strange deaths, disappearances, and rumors of a family curse, but not a single article linked these events into a single chain. Only an archivist immersed in a labyrinth of documents could see the pattern emerging through the centuries. Delving into the Thornfield family tree revealed new depths. In each generation, there was an heir who continued the ritual. Sometimes it was a man, sometimes a woman. Sometimes the victim disappeared without a trace. Sometimes the body was found in old buildings, among books and manuscripts. But always, every 20 years. In modern documents, the name Damien Thornfield has surfaced again. 35 years old, owner of a construction company, sponsor of city exhibitions, participant in charity events. In the photographs, there is a charming smile, a confident look, an expensive suit. But in his eyes, there is the same icy emptiness as in the photographs of the last century. In an interview found in a city newspaper, Damien spoke of the importance of preserving historical memory, of his love for old buildings and archives. The words sounded like a mockery. A man whose family had spent centuries erasing other people's lives for their own prosperity was now concerned with preserving history. Another detail emerged from the donation records. Every time the Thornfields sponsored a restoration or a new hall, there was another murder in the town. The connection was obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. Time flowed differently in the archive. Hours dissolved in the rustling of pages, the creaking of chairs, the whisper of the past. Outside, the night thickened. Rain trickled down the glass, turning the city into a blurry spot of light. The archive became an island in this sea of darkness, and each new document was an anchor, preventing it from sinking into the depths. Almost by chance, my gaze fell on the list of the archive's employees over the past 100 years. Among them were Meili Zhang, Keiko Tanaka, Hiromi Sato, Lin Wang, Yuki Nakamura. All victims, all keepers of memory, women who dedicated their lives to documents. At the bottom of the list was Anna Chen. The name was highlighted in fresh ink. The feeling of someone just writing it there left a cold mark on her skin. At that moment, a shadow flashed past the window. The black car parked at the entrance seemed to be part of the night. Behind the wheel was a silhouette, motionless, showing no signs of life. The light from the headlights snatched the archive sign from the darkness, and for a moment it seemed as if someone's eyes were following every movement inside. An inner voice kept telling me to leave, but my legs wouldn't obey. The archive wasn't just a place to work. It had become a trap, a labyrinth where the walls shifted and the exit disappeared around the next corner. In desperation, his gaze darted to the table. There lay a photograph of the Thornfield family, dated 1890. In the center was a young man with the same face as in the 20th and 21st century photographs. Around him were women and children, their faces disappearing into shadow. On the back was the inscription, "Traditions must be respected." Her fingers trembled as she turned the pages of Elizabeth's diary again. On the last pages were hastily written lines. "I tried to warn her. I tried to break the chain. But no one listens to those who speak of blood. No one believes women who see death in the mirror." At that moment, footsteps were heard in the corridor. Someone was walking slowly across the creaking floor, unhurriedly, as if they knew they were being waited for. The light from the lamp trembled, casting long shadows on the walls. My heart began to beat faster. The air became heavy, as before, a thunderstorm. The footsteps died away at the door. Silence hung over, pressing on the ears. Suddenly, a thin ray of light seeped through the crack under the door. Someone was standing on the other side, not daring to enter, or on the contrary, waiting for fear to do its job. Time stood still. At that moment, past and present merged into one. All the victims, all the archives, all the pages, everything was part of one ritual, one endless night in which memory became a sentence. Inside the archive, amidst the dust and shadows, the bloodline continued its journey. The Thornfield family ensured that the tradition was not broken, and now it was the turn of a new victim, one whose name was already inscribed on the list of memory keepers. Outside, the rain was pouring down harder, washing away the last of the day from the streets. Inside, the night was just beginning, and it seemed like it would never end. The full moon hung over the city like a dead eye, watching for victims in the maze of streets. Its light filtered through the archive windows, turning the familiar shelves into rows of tombstones, and the shadows between them into grave pits. The air became thick, viscous, saturated with the smell of old blood and smoldering candles. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching into an eternity of waiting. Anna knew he would come today. Elizabeth's diary was crystal clear. The Isa ritual was to be performed on a full moon, in a place where the city's memory was kept. The archive was the perfect setting for a finale that had been written for more than a century. Walls soaked in stories of death, documents testifying to crimes, shelves full of files. All of this was to become witness to another murder. She didn't run. She didn't go to the police. She didn't try to hide in another city. Instead, she stayed here among the documents and the shadows, studying every detail of the ritual, every attempt to break the chain. There were hints in the records of past victims, ways to disrupt the ritual, to turn it against the performer. But the cost was horrific. Mei Li Zhang left a note hidden in the cover of an old book. Blood must be spilled voluntarily. Only then will the curse be transferred to the one who bears it. Keiko Tanaka scratched into the wall of her apartment. The victim must know the truth. Knowledge is the key to liberation. Hiromi Sato wrote in her diary, He who kills becomes a prisoner of his own ritual. They all tried to find a way out. They all knew they were part of something bigger than just murder. But no one could break the chain. Their knowledge died with them, dissolved in the blood on the floor, vanished in the killer's empty eyes. The clock on the wall showed midnight when the archive door creaked softly. The steps in the hallway were measured, confident, the steps of a man who knows his way. Damien Thornfield entered the hall, and the moonlight picked out his face from the darkness. The same face that looked out from the photographs of the last century. The same eyes, full of icy calm, and a Chen. His voice was soft, almost gentle. You've been researching my family history. I hope you now understand that this is inevitable. She didn't answer. She just tightened her grip on the knife, the same one she'd found in the evidence box, the weapon she'd used to kill all the previous victims. The metal was cold, the handle sticky against her sweaty palm. Each of them tried to resist, Damien continued, slowly approaching. Each thought that she could change the course of events. But tradition is stronger than individual will. It flows in the blood, lives in the bones, demands fulfillment. The moonlight played across his face, turning his features into a mask. But his eyes were alive and hungry. There was more to them than just a desire to kill, but a need as natural as breathing. Why us? Anna's voice shook, but she forced herself to speak. Why the women who work with the archives? Damien stopped at the shelf, ran his finger along the spines of the folders. Memory is power. He who preserves the past influences the future. We take this power, make it a part of ourselves. Each sacrifice adds years to our life, strength, influence. He turned to her, and there was nothing human in his smile. You have studied our methods better than anyone. You know that resistance is futile, so why not ease your suffering? Anna retreated to the table where the diaries and photographs lay open. Her hand found the pages, Elizabeth's notes, the warnings to the victims, the ritual diagrams. All this time she had been preparing not for escape, but for something else. I know more than you think, she said, raising the knife. I know how to break the chain. Damien laughed, the sound like the rustling of dry leaves. Many have said so. Their bones lie in the foundations of our homes, but they didn't know the main thing. Anna took a step forward. The sacrifice must be voluntary. Only then does the ritual work. If I die resisting, the curse will turn against you. His expression changed. For the first time in the entire conversation, something resembling doubt flashed in his eyes. You're bluffing. Try it. She raised the knife higher. Kill me against my will. See what happens to your family when the ritual is broken. The silence hung between them, heavy and sticky. The moonlight shimmered on the blade of the knife, turning the metal into a shard of frozen time. In that moment, past and present merged. All the victims, all the killers, all the attempts to break the chain converged at one point. Damien stepped forward, but his movements were unsteady. Doubt ate away at him like acid. He was used to submissive victims, to those who accepted death as inevitable. Resistance was a new element in an old formula. Even if you're right, he whispered, you'll still die. The only difference is who follows you. The difference is that the chain will be broken. Anna tightened her grip on the hilt. Your family will lose power. The curse will turn against you, and no one else will die for your prosperity. He lunged at her with the fury of a hunted animal, but Anna was ready. The knife entered his chest as easily as if cutting through water. Damien froze, looking at the hilt sticking out of his ribs. Blood slowly spread across his white shirt, turning the fabric into a map of death. You don't understand. He fell to his knees, gasping for air. Without the ritual, we'll all die. The whole family, okay. Anna stepped back, watching. The life drained from his eyes. Let them die. Let the curse end with you. Damien Thornfield died among the archive shelves, surrounded by the documents of his family's crimes. His blood soaked into the old floorboards, mingled with the dust of centuries. The moonlight faded, as if the sky had turned away from what was happening. Anna stood over the body, feeling something change in the air. The weight that had been pressing on the archive for decades began to dissipate. The shadows between the shelves became ordinary shadows. The smell of blood and decay was replaced by the simple aroma of old paper, but the victory had a price. The mirror on the wall reflected a face that was already beginning to change. The eyes were growing colder, the features sharper. Killing. Damien had not broken the curse. It had passed it on. Now Anna Chen was the last heir of the Thornfield line, the bearer of their dark tradition. 20 years from now, in 1943, someone else will be sitting in an archive, studying criminal records, finding photographs from the scene of Damien Thornfield's murder, seeing an Asian woman in the background who hasn't aged in 2 decades, and realizing that the cycle continues. Anna collected the documents, burned the diaries and notes. The history of the Thornfield family should have died with the last heir. But the curse remained, ingrained in her bones, flowing through her veins. Now she was the keeper not only of the archives, but also of a dark tradition. Dawn found her cleaning up. The body was gone, vanished into thin air, as befits the damned. Only the bloodstains on the floor remained, which she carefully scrubbed off. By morning, the archive looked like usual, a quiet place where the city's memories were kept. But memory is different. Sometimes it preserves not only events, but also curses. Sometimes the one who studies the past becomes part of it. And then the story does not end. It just changes the narrator. Anna Chen continued working in the archive. Colleagues noted that she had become more withdrawn, cold, but no one suspected that in her eyes there now lived a hunger that could only be satisfied once every 20 years. A hunger that demanded the blood of a young woman working with documents. The archive of death found a new keeper, and the cycle continued.